Okay, folks, welcome back. We're here with Mr. Todd Sylvester today. Todd Sylvester Inspires. I'm super excited to be chatting with him. You guys will hear this, he's got one heck of a story. Todd, I kind of wanted to start with the main connection point for us, which is the sports story, the athletic story. I find myself coming back to this so many times with the
Yeah.
people I talk to because there's just so much to it.
Yeah.
So first of all, I mean, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be on.
And yeah, so talk to me. When I read your story and you have the awesome kind of about you video on your website.
Yeah.
You mentioned that like you grew up in a loving home and you pretty much had every opportunity to play every sport.
Yeah.
What drew you to basketball?
That's a good question. I just fell in love with it. I was a huge Michael Jordan fan, even when he played for North Carolina Tar Heels back in the day. And, that's when I was growing up, Sports Illustrated was like the thing to get in the mail. Like once a month, you're going to get the Sports Illustrated cover. You couldn't wait to see what's on the cover. And I remember seeing Michael Jordan. It was Michael Jordan, uh, Sam Perkins on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and they had just won the national title, and they were both holding up the number one. And I mean, it's stuff like that. I just was a huge, I grew up watching the Lakers and the Celtics battle it out in the NBA finals. It seemed like every year. And I don't know, I just fell in love with it. I had a basketball court on the side of my house, and I
Yes.
just remember, that's where I want to put my effort. I was just in love with it.
And so obviously I feel like you might have answered the question already, but like what? Because I can kind of tell my story in a minute about hockey, but like you said, you
Yeah,
weren't the most gifted athlete naturally. What
sure.
what brought you to just practice hours on end? You said you would just practice, practice, practice. What led you
Yeah.
to that? Like, what do you feel like it was?
That's another great question because, even my family were like, "Why are you so obsessed with basketball?" And I did. I was a skinny kid. I was a short kid, and you know how when you're in junior high, there's some kids that are already shaving, and I'm
Yeah.
still this right. I'm just this young little kid, and I just knew that one, if I was going to compete, I was going to have to really work my butt off. But I just knew, I don't know, I had this all or nothing mentality, and I learned this at a young age, which is a really good thing in certain areas of your life, but it's a really bad thing in other areas of your life. And I've always been like that. I was just all or nothing. Even to this day, I still go back and forth with that in my own, just regular life with my family. And they'll laugh at me sometimes like, dude, why are you working out like that? I'm over there just killing myself. And I'm like, what do you mean? This is working out, you
I'm in the
know?
gym. This is
I'm in
what
the
I'm going
gym.
to
Let's
do.
go. Let's get crazy. And so, but it really fueled me back then, basketball. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to practice 2 to 3 hours a day. And that was my goal. And I'm telling you, I was obsessed with it. And we'd have neighbors calling my parents going, "Hey, would you tell your boy to quit bouncing that damn ball?" Cause he'd be in the backyard, just do,
Yeah.
just for 3 hours, man. And I feel bad because I'm sure my neighbors were like, "Are you kidding me? He's out there again." So yeah, I don't know. Again, that love and that passion to be really good at that sport was just there.
I mean, we'll talk about the all or not the negatives to the possible negatives to the all or nothing
Yeah.
in a minute, but it sounds like this is something. I was talking to my coach recently, and I asked him because he's a part of a company that coaches a lot of people, success coaching, life coaching, business coaching. And I said, they've coached say 700-800 people. I said, what separates, the people who just crush it and the people who maybe struggle a little bit? And he said a number of things, but he said when it comes down to it, and he said this, I think this is an athlete's mindset type thing. The people who succeed just straight up want it more. Like
Yeah.
that's it. And I think it sounds like that all or nothing, or that like I'm just willing to do things that make the neighbors pissed off at me. Like I'm just willing to do anything I need to
Yeah.
succeed. Like it feels to me like that has now translated into your business as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. That is spot on. And then I would add, I was lucky enough to have a dad who loved sports just as much as me. and he provided every opportunity. I mean, he's the one that poured the basketball court on the side of my house. He's the one that built a chain link fence that was 15 feet high so the ball wouldn't bounce over into the neighbor's backyard where they were getting ticked off at that. And I went to all the basketball camps. He spent all this money sending me to the best camps. And so, yeah, I was fortunate there that I had a dad that was also very supportive, that wanted me to succeed at it. But you're right. I wanted it. I just wanted it, man. So bad.
I think that's so, it's so simple that it's almost profound, right? Like, everyone
Yeah.
listens like, are you kidding? Like, that's all it is. Right. But,
Yeah.
now you mentioned the importance of support, which clearly, you've had your whole life, and you provide now. We'll get into the addiction and all that kind of stuff, but what else? Like, I see so many coaches who, because I work with a lot of personal trainers, a lot of former athletes who
Yeah.
did succeed at their sport. They consciously want it really bad. And when I talk to them, they're like, hell yeah, I want to impact the world. I want to support other people who are struggling with what I struggle with, all that kind of stuff. But then subconsciously, there's all these things going on in the background. Do you have any, maybe you don't even know, because I mean, you were just doing it naturally, but do you have anything that that someone could use that would help them, I guess, want it more, or really cultivate that, that athlete all or nothing mentality? Because it can be powerful if people can cultivate it. Can you cultivate it, or does it just have to come from within?
I think it's cultivated. I do think it comes from within, but I think we all have it.
Right.
I always say this to my clients: adversity and addiction is your wake-up call to your greatness. It's when we feel uneasy about something, it's our body going, hey, wake the hell up. You're better than this. And so I think every single person has this mentality. You think about it, working hard at something, if you do it long enough, it becomes habitual. It becomes a habit. And so if I'm lazy, and I'm sitting on the couch all summer long, it becomes a habit. And it doesn't mean necessarily I'm a quote unquote lazy person. What it is that I have built up this habit over time that, yeah, I don't like getting up and moving my body right now. And it's the same is true if I'm the guy that's like, okay, getting up day after day after day, but in the beginning it sucks. It's like, oh man, this is hard. This is tough. But when I fight through that, it's interesting you asked this question. I just wrapped up a psychoeducational group with 16 clients here at Wasatch Recovery. And my very first question to them was, what's the difference between motivation and drive? And so the difference is, just for time's sake, motivation is it's an emotion. It's fleeting. It comes and goes. Like, people might listen to this podcast today and go, man, I feel motivated, man. And then what does motivation do? It always goes away. That's where drive has to kick in. That's where I have to dig deep. Like, the last thing I want to do is go to the gym today. The last thing I want to do is write a gratitude letter to my parents today. But you know what? That's what I should do, and I'm going to do it. That's where I tap into that inner strength. And drive is like a muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it gets. And pretty soon, working hard becomes habitual. And it's like, so people go, man, you work so hard. I don't even recognize that anymore. It's because it's just what I do. So yes, can it be cultivated? 100% it can.
Yeah. I really like the simplicity there too, is like, it's just another habit. Like, it really is just another habit, like brushing your teeth, right? If you forget to brush your teeth, like, it's hard to get back on track sometimes, right? Like, but when you can, and it sounds like, over that time, you just became the guy who practiced basketball 2 to 3 hours a day.
Well, yeah. And you give a good point about brushing your teeth. It reminds me of have you ever heard of the 2190 rule?
No, please share.
What it is it takes about roughly 21 days to create or break a habit. So if you do something 21 days in a row, it'll become a habit. If you do something 90 days in a row, it becomes a lifestyle. So you don't have to put on the mirror, hey, Gavin, make sure you brush your teeth tonight. You don't have to do that. Why? Because you just brush your teeth. It's just what you do. because you've brushed your teeth well past 90 days in a row. It's become a lifestyle. And it's no
Yes.
different with this. If I do something 90 days in a row, it becomes a part of me, good or bad. And that's the thing. If we're
Yeah.
doing something negatively that much, it becomes a part of us. That doesn't mean we can't break it, but it just means it's going to be a difficult process to change that around.
Yeah. And it's just going to take that like shifting. And I think one of the hardest things about creating a new habit or even like starting to create that is just the unknown
Right.
the discomfort of something different, right? Even if something, and even if something we know is bad or we don't like it, it's still more comfortable than the other thing, even if we
Yep.
know it's better, right?
For sure. Yeah, we love comfortability. The human body does not like to be uncomfortable. You
Right.
know, when we're standing for a long time, what do? I need to sit down. Why? Because our body's going, this is uncomfortable. So what
Yeah.
do? We search for a chair. It's no different. It's comfortable being lazy, even though we know this sucks. I'm miserable. I'm depressed. But yeah, I know getting up and moving is the best thing for me, but I don't want to do it because it's comfortable watching Netflix today, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm used to
And
it.
I've been there.
Oh yeah. Especially over the last 15 months. Some
For
days,
sure. Yeah.
some
COVID's
days you
put a,
got to do that.
yeah, it's put a kink in a lot of us.
And okay, so I wanted to dive in. So for those who don't know, Todd's story gets really interesting here, where at a young age, you said like ninth grade, he was introduced. You were introduced to drugs, to marijuana at first.
Yeah. So ninth grade was when I first smoked pot, but I took my first sip of alcohol when I was 11 years old, which I think it's like fifth or sixth grade. My
Wow.
parents had a wet bar in the house. I didn't get drunk at 11, but me and my little brother would go back there and, sip on, my dad's whiskey
Right.
and I knew it was wrong, but I fell in love with the rush. Again, that all or nothing mentality. I'm like, man, that was fun. And then,
Right.
yeah, ninth grade is when I got introduced to pot for the first time, fell in love with that. And I was all in at that point, man. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to party. I knew it.
Okay. So you mentioned, so I've had another D1 college football player on here. He's an addict as well.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I think 5 years sober.
Oh, right on.
And I said to him, what do you think led to that? And he goes, dude, I'm a straight up addict. Like I'm just an addict. And I think that, comes from the all or nothing thing you
Yeah.
talk about
Yep.
that is me, all or nothing. I'm going to do it. And you mentioned you fell in love with the rush
Yep.
because, and I mean, this is something that my experience, I've thought about this a lot. I've really slowed down my drinking because it doesn't really do much for me anymore.
Sure.
But I remember when I was playing hockey, when I was younger, it felt really good. Um, physically, it feels good. It
Sure.
helped me fit in and be accepted. It allowed me to get out of my anxious brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then to reiterate, it felt really good. It
Yeah.
was really fun, right? And you
Sure.
said
Yeah.
you fell in love with the rush, and I'm wondering, like, was it almost part of like how it made you feel, kind of beyond the physical chemical stuff, but like just how it made you feel, that rush of something that
Yep.
you fell in love with?
Yeah, absolutely. It was like, a lot of, when you talk to a lot of addicts, they fall in love with the ritual of getting high.
Mm,
A heroin addict will fall in love with preparing the rig. They're getting all ready. That they love that almost even more than actually getting high. I mean,
mhm.
they feel a rush and a high from that. And so I knew what I was doing at that age was wrong because I know my parents would have been like, what do you know? Yeah, that's unacceptable. So therefore that was kind of like, ooh, this is wrong. I shouldn't be doing it. But again, yeah, just that feeling, that burning sensation down my throat when I drank that vodka for the first time. and,
Right.
and and I know it sounds, and again, I don't recommend this for anyone because I just always worry that I would never want someone to become an alcoholic or a drug addict. But again, that's what happened to me. I just fell in love with that. And I grew up around partying. My parents both partied and it just was my life. I didn't know any different, to be honest.
Yeah. It's interesting. I just want to touch on one thing, the difference between like, I don't know about your parents, but my parents partied as well. They drank
Yeah.
on weekends. You know,
Yeah.
they Friday, Saturday, they'd have friends over for dinner and they'd drink. But and when I got to that age, drinking was totally acceptable, but smoking pot, not acceptable at all. And it's just,
Right.
it interests me, the difference in the stigmas around them.
I know.
And you
Yeah.
being someone, into this world, I just love, just curiously, I'd love your take on kind of like the difference in stigma around, like, alcohol has its negatives, so does weed. Um,
Yeah.
what do you think about that difference? Now, it's legal up here in Canada and some states as
Sure.
well now, so it's the
Yeah.
same as alcohol, but there's still a stigma around it.
Yeah, there's stigmas around both, but then again, the stigmas are changing. I mean, marijuana back when you and I were growing up was like, stay away, it's the worst thing ever, and
Yep.
now it's obviously a lot more open. A lot of people, you don't typically die from a drug overdose from marijuana.
Right.
um, but the stigma around alcohol, like from my experience, not only being an alcoholic myself, but seeing what it's done to people's lives, boy, alcohol is destroyed more lives, and that's the scary part. Whereas marijuana maybe not as destructive, but i always go I always say this to a pot smoker. um like, a pot smoker will come to me and say all the good things about pot, and then I'll say, well, here's all the negatives, and then what do? We just kind of butt heads, right? We don't really get anywhere. But there's one thing the any pot smoker can't argue with, this is that pot robs you of your passion.
Mm.
Apathy becomes your passion when you, lack of a better word, chronically smoke marijuana. Seriously, it becomes you apathy. Like, we melt into the couch,
Yep.
right? Yep, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. Yep, I'll get to that later. I'm going to sit here and just, I'm baked. I'm done. It's like, here I am. And again, I'm not here to ruffle anyone's feathers or whatever, but and people might say, well, Todd, where are you coming from? Well, I smoked it for almost 10 years. I've been clean from it for almost 31. And I've studied it over that 31 years. I've seen over 17,000 clients in that time frame. So I'm just not pulling this out of the air.
Yep.
This has been my experience, not only personally, but talking to thousands and thousands of people who have been down that road.
I love that. And this speaks back to our habit conversation around this, like,
Yeah.
it becomes, like you said, apathy kind of just becomes the habit. It's like, well, this feels great. And
Sure.
it's more comfortable than getting up and going to do the thing. So I think by the sounds of it, what you're saying is where they are similar is that no one is rapidly moving towards their best selves while they're using regularly.
Thank you. You said that beautifully, because people say, well, pot helps me with this and that. And again, we could sit there and argue that. And sometimes it can. I'm not against that. But you said it. It does not allow us for us to become our best selves. It really keeps us, it holds us back. I'll always ask someone who struggles with anxiety, who's smoking pot for their anxiety. And I'll say, well, first, you're going to make it worse.
Yeah.
Maybe not right in the moment. But the other thing is, if there was a more natural way to do it, would you be open to that? That's how I approach it. I don't shame anyone for doing it. I just, hey, would you be open to another avenue that may be more healthy, more natural, actually, believe it or not? And would you be open to that? And most of them will say, yeah, I'm open to anything. And so it's about educating ourselves around those things. And so I take great pride in helping people go, expand their awareness and go, oh, wow, I never looked at it that way, Todd. That really opened my eyes.
I really like that. And it sounds like the issue comes into play when we become reliant on any of these,
exactly,
these things.
Yep.
What would you say? Would you say like things like breath work and obviously meditation, those types of things? Are those the more natural ways to reduce anxiety, or do you have any other thoughts on that?
Oh boy, how much time do you got, man? We could do a whole session here, dude.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love that.
You know what's interesting? Again, I work with people who have anxiety all day long. That's probably the number one issue I deal with my clients is anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there too. I've had anxiety so bad that I couldn't get out of my bed. I felt like brushing my teeth was impossible. So I've suffered from it, and I know how bad it can be. So I don't want your listeners to think I'm downplaying anxiety. It's real, and it's a tough thing for a lot of people, and my heart goes out to them. But what's interesting, when I ask a client, well, define anxiety for me. What's the definition? And 9 out of 10 people cannot answer it. They sit there and they go, well, and they try to describe it, which is understandable. I feel like I stepped off a step and I didn't hit the bottom yet. It's like that free falling feeling. And, and but I'll say, well, what's the definition though? What is it? And that's to me, the first key is awareness. Mm-hmm. So the best definition in my 31 years in helping clients overcome anxiety is this one. It's the misuse of your imagination.
Oh, yeah. So good.
And they look at me and go, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And here's why this is true for your listeners. Your brain and central nervous system does not know the difference between a real event or if you imagine it. It doesn't know the difference. So if I'm imagining something bad's going to happen, my brain and central nervous system's telling my body it's happening now. And that's why I feel anxious in the moment. But it's not even happening yet, whatever I'm thinking about. So I'm imagining something that isn't real. Like an example would be this for the listeners. Have you ever watched a scary movie? You're sitting there, you're really into it. Something kind of jumps off the screen and you coil up to protect yourself, right? And then you start to laugh, your heart's beating fast. You're in a movie, nothing's going to get you. But for that moment, your brain believed it was real.
Yeah.
And so that's how powerful our imaginations are. So when we can learn to control our imaginations, and that's the most natural thing to do, you start overcoming anxiety. It's amazing. And we don't have time to get into it now, but that's where I start with these people is I help them create awareness around what is it really? And then when right there, just the response you had when I gave the definition, you went, oh man, I get that 10 out of 10 times. You're like, oh my hell, that's it.
100%. That's
I'm gonna grab a water.
Yeah, no worries. That's the number one, like for me, I remember someone told me once, and I've used this numerous times with my clients is, I'll talk to them about, this little bit of fear that they bring up, oh, I'm afraid of this thing. And I'll kind of say, oh, and so then, your brain goes this, and then you're going to die alone. And they're like, yeah, pretty much. And I'm like, so you're just essentially a really good fiction writer right now. You're just writing a really good fiction novel,
Yeah.
That's perfect. What our brains just kind of get so wound up, and inevitably it goes negative. And like you said, that's the imagination piece.
Yeah.
Just going wild. But I really think that, and the issue with a lot of these coping mechanisms, or these almost like numbing agents or pacifiers, so to speak, is that they are just quicker and easier than doing some of this other work, but the work is the success. Like that's what's going to get you to the place that's going to, have success in life, in business, in relationships, whatever it is. Right.
Yep.
I want to go back to, so we kind of went on a drug and alcohol tangent there, which is really good, but I had this big question around your story. So you started on the drugs and alcohol and you fell in love with it, and it really kind of became a part of your life. Yeah. Yet you kept practicing. Yeah. And you actually, it sounds like up until the end of your senior year, you kept getting better. Like you were you were like the star player. You guys end up winning state. What in your mind, maybe if you can go back to that time, what kept you practicing? Because the majority of people would kind of get into the weed and the partying, and the partying would ramp up and the sports would kind of start to fall off. And they'd kind of, like, for me, it wasn't necessarily just the partying. There was a whole bunch of other things, but the hockey kind of just went by the wayside and it became less and less important. What happened there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. The partying wasn't catching up with how I was playing. My sophomore year, I was the starting point guard. I led the team in every category. We took first in state. My junior year, we took second in state. I led the team in every category. Senior year, I was team captain with two other guys. We took first in state again. And it wasn't until my senior year when the effects of the partying and the drug use and all that stuff and the alcohol use um, caught up with me, if that makes sense. So early on, I didn't notice that. I just like, yep, I'm partying, having a good time. When we're young, our bodies recover quickly. It feels like, but it was more mental and emotional distress. My senior year is when I started going downhill. And so, but again, basketball was my life. It was my identity. If you were to ask me back then, who are you? I'm like, I'm a basketball player. There's no other, that's all I have to say. There's nothing else. And so, again, there was that obsession with being a basketball player that kept me going. But my senior year is when I really started to struggle and battle,
Yeah. And then you see, it seems like and I would assume, this is an assumption, but I would assume, the school and then playing on the team, like that kind of kept you on the straight and narrow, at least as long as you needed to be on the straight and narrow to play. Right. Because
Yeah.
you guys did win and you were a captain and you were
Yep.
clearly a part of the team. And then it seems like that's kind of when the bottom fell out, was when that season ended. You said
Yeah.
you got the scholarship opportunity. And this is where it's really interesting, where our stories collide. So the number one thing you wanted was that scholarship opportunity,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And you got it. And for me, the number one thing I wanted was, so I got a chance to play in the Western Hockey League, which was kind of the
Yeah.
best feeder league towards pros.
Sweet.
And it was my draft year to the NHL. And I got the opportunity. Our starting goalie got hurt, and I got the opportunity to step in. And for lack of a better term, completely shit the bed.
Mm.
And it's interesting because I had all these other things whirling around in my head, all these other things. And that was kind of, when I hear your story, that was kind of my bottom falling out.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us a little bit about, practicing with that team. You got the scholarship offer, and then what happened when the coach called you into the office, and how that went down.
Yeah. When I got the scholarship, the partying got way worse and I wasn't practicing like I normally did. Again, that's when the partying really started to affect my output and my work ethic, you know. And I started practicing with that team I got the scholarship with. The coach pulls me into his office and he just looked at me and said, "Dude, what's going on?" And right then I knew I was in trouble because I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't playing well. I was struggling and battling. And I finally just said, "Coach, I know I'm not playing well. I know I need to do better." And he said, "You know what, Todd, this is the big boy leagues. I don't have time to mess around." And he goes, "And I hate to inform you, but I'm taking away your scholarship because these kids are walking on. They want it more than you." Back to how bad do you want it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
You were, what was it? I was told one time by, so there was a guy that I used to work out with, a bunch of pro athletes, and then I used to train pro athletes, pro hockey players. And one of them, he got this big contract. And so like $5 million a year for 4 years or whatever. And then the GM came to him and said, "I just want you to know, there's a bunch of barking dogs coming up your ass, and you're wearing dog bone underwear right now. So you better get your ass going." And
right.
that's the thing. Like, there's something to be said for that underdog. They want it, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, you wanted it, and then when you got it, there was just a number of other things going on in your life where it was like, I got it. I've done it. You said you set your sights on getting that scholarship. You got it. Well, what better time than to continue doing what you've been doing in a celebratory manner,
Yeah.
partying, drinking, doing drugs, all these things. Unfortunately, and the same as me, that's what starts to take away from the performance. Now, I'd love to hear from you, because I still remember a moment in that season when I was struggling, that one of my coaches pulled me aside and told me the story of the self-fulfilling prophecy. He told me the story of, you're pissed off that you're not playing, you're mad that you're not getting the chances you want, so you're not trying in practice. He told me about the self-fulfilling prophecy. And I remember looking at him, I was 18. I'm
Right.
looking at him like, "You're an idiot. Like, what do you know?" You know,
Right.
and, but
Right.
I'm 33 now. I still remember that. So
Right.
clearly it was, and now the fact that you remember, I'm sure you can put yourself on that bench in that coach's office
Oh
at any
yeah.
moment. Do you feel like that was, and I know things did end up getting worse for you, but do you feel like that was kind of a starting point to the shift, even though things had to get worse before they got better?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I maybe didn't recognize it in the moment, but looking back, I can see how that started, causing me to look at things maybe a little differently.
Mm,
But in the moment, no, I didn't notice that. I just felt like, you know what, life's over. I want to be dead,
mhm.
and that's it. But yeah, looking back now, I can see how that was a wake up call,
Right.
if you will.
At the
Um,
moment, in the moment, we never see it, do we? It's
Never see it.
retrospect is where we
Yeah,
see it. Yeah. And
exactly.
and then you're very open with the fact that, and I think this is unfortunately more common than most people know. If you guys aren't athletes, or if you didn't play at a high level, the amount of athletes that I know who have struggled with drugs and alcohol,
Mhm.
um, especially when they know that they're done in their
Yeah,
sport,
for
and
sure.
B, you know, wrestled with the possibility of ending their life. It sounds like that became very, very real for you after this happened, until
Absolutely.
an amazing moment. Do you see that with athletes as well? And also, why do you think that is, that so many of them struggle with it?
Well, because that's our identity. We label ourselves, I'm an athlete, or I'm a basketball player, or I'm a baseball player, I'm a dancer,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a teacher. And those are all good things to be, but these are things that we do. It's not who we are. And when we think it's who we are and it goes away, right? Now we're in trouble. If we lean on anything that can be snatched away in an instant, we will fall and be bruised,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm leaning on basketball for my happiness and my validation, all of it. And I think a lot of athletes do this, and I get it because again, all or nothing, right? I'm in. But when
Yep.
it goes away from whether it's an injury, an addiction, you're just not good enough, you don't make it to the next level. Then if that's your identity, you're like, well, what's the point of moving on? And
Mm-hmm.
that's why so many of them struggle, with depression and anxiety and in these mental health issues, because they have identified this is who I am. And without this, I'm nothing. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense? So knowing who we
Oh
are
yeah.
is critical. And that's what I have had to learn over the years is I had to figure out who am I really outside of basketball? I'm not a basketball player. Basketball is something I did,
Mm-hmm.
not who I am made me a good basketball player.
Right. And that, I remember sitting there. I remember sitting there probably 3 to 4 years after, maybe even 5 years after my last, competitive hockey game,
Hmm.
and thinking, I have no idea who I am and what I stand for.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I remember calling up a friend and saying, how do you come up with core values? How do you do that?
Yeah.
I didn't know how. I didn't know, because my core value was play hockey, be good, play in the NHL, drink, party, you know, that was it. That's all I had.
Yeah.
That's all I knew. And
Yeah.
then, when you finish, of course, we talk about comfort, the sport goes away, but the comfortable thing of partying and drinking and all that stuff stays right there, because it's even more
Yeah.
accessible now, because we have more time. We don't have
Yeah.
to be physically active anymore.
Right.
It's just easy.
It
Right.
is. It's
So,
just easier.
no wonder so many people, but it really, I think that identity thing, and I think there's so many people who work with former athletes and help them figure out, what is it that you really, like, who are you beyond the sport, beyond all the accolades? Who are you? That's what matters, because the accolades and all that, like you said, it can be snatched in a second.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
Now I'd love to get to the turnaround story. You give us maybe a brief background, because people can go find this story on your website, but just a
Mhm.
brief background into the lemonade stand, and then I'd love to know, once you've told it, what happened in your brain that day, like what made you stop and turn around. That's what I'm
Yeah.
just super curious about that.
Yeah. No, it's a great story. It still blows my mind that it even happened, honestly.
Uh-huh.
I do have to go back a little bit. So when I was getting ready and I had planned my suicide, I was getting ready to do it. I, I, for, for, for lack of time here, I, I had these girls basically challenge me to reach out to a higher power. I didn't believe in God. I didn't have a higher power at the time. I didn't, that was so foreign to me, but I was in such a dark place. I thought, you know what, I'll give it a try. And I did. I reached out and I got a response in a way that it was unmistakable. And this is before the lemonade stand. But so now I'm meeting with this mentor of mine who's helping me through this recovery process, if you will. But I'm still in relapse mode 100%. I mean, I'm using every day, I'm drinking every day. I'm in a dark place. I'm still wrestling with this thought of, just end your life, you know? And at the time I'm a bartender, which is
Of
not a good
course.
idea if you're trying to quit drinking, right?
Yeah.
But as a bartender, I would get tips from the waiters and waitresses because I would I'd get their drinks ready for their customers. And then anyone that would sit at the bar, I would make their drinks, right? Well, I'd get a lot of tips, obviously, and I'd get a lot of change, and I'd get a lot of, quarters, nickels, and dimes. And I would keep all that change in the cup holders of my car, right? No big deal. I just would, I'd use it for gas money. Sometimes I'd buy an eighth of marijuana with it. I mean, that was back when, it was like $10 for an eighth. And anyway, I'm really having a rough time, and I'm about 8.5 months into this quote unquote trying to change my life.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling and I'm still depressed. I'm still wrestling with wanting to be alive. And I was driving down. It was a Saturday. It was a beautiful sunny day. It was warm outside. It was in the middle of summer. And I'm driving up this big windy road. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this little girl selling lemonade. No big deal. I drive right on past. And then I had this impression come over me that said, turn around and give her all the money in your car. And I thought, wow, that would be amazing. And so I flipped my car around because I had like $40 in my cup holders of quarters, nickels, and dimes. So I pull up, roll down my window. There's this cute little fourth grade girl sitting there. I said, how much? She said, 25 cents. So she pours it, hands it to me. I set it on my dashboard. I tell her to cup her hands in front of her, like so. And I start scooping all this money into her hands, right? This girl starts freaking out. She's like, no way, no way. I'm like, hold on, I got more. And I just keep going. And she's freaking out. She's tearing up from emotions. And that is like tattooed on my brain. I'm just like, I cannot believe what's going on right now. I'm like, I've got more. It takes me like 10 scoops to give her all my money, right? So the very last scoop, she throws it on her little table that's there, and she takes off into the house. And I'm sitting there thinking, she's going to go in there and tell her parents some dude just gave her $1 million. And so I pull away, and I'm just going, I can't believe that just happened. And as I pull away, Gavin, I start to cry harder than I've ever cried before in my life. Have you ever cried so hard you feel like you're cleansing your soul?
I've had that feeling before.
Yeah.
Yes.
This was one of those soul cleansing cries. I'm not kidding you. I have to put my car in park. I put my face in my hands and I just sob, because for the first time in my life, I actually did something for someone else. In addiction, it's very selfish. I'm going to lie to you. I'm going to cheat you. I'll manipulate you to get what I want. And for the first time in my life, I actually made someone's day. And in that moment, I loved who I was. In that moment, I wanted to be clean. In that moment, dude, it lit my soul on fire. And there's a beautiful quote. You can probably see it on my back wall here. It's by Ferdinand Foch. He says, the most powerful weapon on earth is the human soul on fire. Dude, this lit my soul on fire. And I thought, all or nothing mentality. I said, if that little girl's there next Saturday, I'm giving her all my money. So the next Saturday, on purpose, I drive to that same spot. And sure enough, she's sitting there and she freaks out. She's like,
here
no
comes.
way.
Yeah, here comes.
Here comes the money guy.
Yeah.
And I give her $20 in quarters. I do this the next Saturday, I give her $15 in quarters. The next Saturday, $30 in quarters. I do this for the next 2.5 months, every Saturday. And every time I pull away, Gavin, I just start crying. And I'm like, that's when I knew I want to change my life forever. I want to help other people. I want to make a difference in this world. And And that's when my life really started to taking a turn for the better. And then I started doing some things that really brought joy in my life. And it eventually led to me being clean from drugs and alcohol. And that was 31 years ago.
Man, there's so much that I want to touch on from that. I'm so excited like, what an incredible story. I just like, there's,
Thanks.
I've been taught numerous times, and I have to continue to remind myself of it, that, and whatever you want to believe in, God, Mother Nature,
Right.
Buddha, the universe, I often call it the universe.
Sure.
And, that ask and you shall receive, really. It really is that. And that every time, the universe is really cheeky, and it will
Yeah.
always show you, or it will always present to you what you want in a way,
Yeah.
you said, that is unmistakable, but that you never expected.
Yeah.
It's never
Totally.
the way you probably expected it to be, cut and dry. This is exactly it. It's, I'm no longer addicted. Now this, now that, right? But it was this odd situation that you never could have even imagined, that allowed you to get that feeling of serving someone, of making someone
Oh,
feel
yeah.
better. And I would even say that, you talk about addiction and being like doing things for yourself. I would even say that in sports, oftentimes, you have to be selfish. You have to be it. This is why one of the issues with athletes, right, is because you have to be self-indulged. You have to do everything you can to make it to the next level, to be the starter, to be the best player you can, no matter
For
what,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, you'll die on that floor if you have to, like,
Yeah.
whatever you got to do, right? And yeah, that's for your teammates, and yeah, the fans gets, and the coach get accolades for it, but at the end of the day, that's for you. That's because
Yeah.
you want to win.
Exactly.
um so, to be able to do something for someone else, I want to touch on setting your sights on service, but I'd curiously, the human soul on fire, I guess maybe I'm answering my own question here. Do you just have to be looking for something that sets your soul on fire? Like, how do you find the thing? Because you found it by serving someone, paying someone at a lemonade stand, that's what
Yeah.
you wanted to make other people feel better. You wanted to serve others. How do you find what sets your soul on fire?
Great question. And I think it's as simple as go help someone. Get
Mm,
out of your selfishness and go make a difference. It can be as simple as holding the door for someone or buying the cup of coffee for the person that's standing behind you in line. Like little things like that. It doesn't have to be something big. I mean,
mhm.
what I did at that lemonade stand wasn't huge, but there's a beautiful principle behind this. And here's the principle. If you want to be, give it away. So fill in the blank. If you want to be happy, go give away happiness. And now you've got it, right? If I want to be inspiring, go inspire someone. And now I'm inspiring. And here's what's funny. I'll have my clients, they'll say, well, I'm depressed. I can't give away what I don't have. And I'll say, here's the ironic thing. You actually have it, but you won't recognize it until you go give it away.
It's
And
always within us, right?
it's always there. So I don't care who you are. It feels good when you help somebody. So that's how you light the fire. Now, there's different avenues. You might like helping people who are struggling with anxiety, whereas someone else wants to work with younger kids who are just trying to build self-esteem, or someone else might want to work just with girls who are trying to find purpose in their life. I mean, there's so many different avenues, but at the end of the day, it all comes back to us making a difference in someone's life.
Mhm.
That is where the beauty is. That's where the fire is, right?
Yep.
No, I always say this. If you master the first 11 steps of AA, you will drink again. If you master step 12, you'll never touch another drop. What's step 12? Go out and help someone else. Give it away. I gave away this money at the lemonade stand. And what did I get in return? I got my life, man.
Yeah. And
I
this
had
and
fun.
everything that is now. Like,
Everything. Yeah. Everything from that point. I'm sitting here because of that.
yeah.
So you got to give to get. So
Yeah.
if you want fire, go give away some fire and you've got it.
Yes.
I'm
Oh
telling you,
man.
there it is, my friend. It's one of the most powerful principles on the planet.
And if you're listening to this right now and you don't want to run through a brick wall right now, I don't know what's going on, because this is inspiring. This is amazing. I'm ready to just go crazy right now.
Tackle the world, baby.
But that's it. Like, yeah, give like, oh, what a great principle. Anything. And I think, the more that I study, monks and all those things, it's like the purpose of anything we do really at its core should be, then the most happy people, or the most content and fulfilled people, is to serve others. I
Yeah,
mean, if you can find a way to serve others, whether that be a product, or whether that be a coaching service, or whether that be a program, or whatever it is, or whether that be, AA,
yeah,
finding a
whatever
way to
works.
serve
Sure,
other people, will ultimately serve you in many ways that you never really knew. Um,
absolutely.
the other thing that you mentioned, and I know we're running relatively short on time, but the other thing you mentioned in your bio on your website was you have this unique gift to develop trusting relationships quickly. Brief story. I was ruminating to my coach about how frustrated I was that I seemed to have this one foot stuck in the bro, have a beer, talk about the bullshit,
Yeah,
and this other foot that, like, I could have a conversation like this all day, this highest
sure.
self thing. And
Yeah,
I was frustrated. I was like, why can't I just jump into this thing? And he was like, that is your superpower. That you can be this guy who's sitting there
hmm,
having beers, and then you can shift someone's perspective with one question or with one
sure.
conversation.
Yeah.
I'd love to dig in a little more on that. How did you figure that out? I guess, what unique events or what unique things led to you being able to do this?
Well, again, I think everything that I've been through, I have a philosophy that life happens for us. I've been through hell and back. If I could go back to my addiction and say one word to it, or two words, I would say thank you, because I get to sit here and talk to you today. I think, empathy is probably the key. Like, I can empathize with someone who's been through hell. I can empathize with someone who feels alone. I can empathize with someone who wants to be dead. And I think that's why I can relate, and I can build a trusting relationship quickly with a client, is because I've been where they're at.
Yeah.
That really does give me a little bit of an advantage maybe over someone else. I'm not saying you have to go through everything to be able to relate with someone, but I'll tell you, for me, it's really made a huge difference. And I'm very passionate about what I do. And I think, and I know this is going to sound corny and cliche, but it's love, man. I let these clients know that I love them by calling them out on their bullshit.
Mhm.
I am real with them. If I see them being unhealthy, doing unhealthy, I'm going to call them out. Why? Because I love what I do. And I'm trying to show that I have love towards them on some level, right?
Well, and they've never had someone care enough to call them out on their bullshit either.
Mm-hmm. If you really care about someone, you'll call them out.
Yeah.
It's when we enable their behavior and we think, oh, I don't want to ruffle their feathers. Well, really, that's not showing love, man.
Hmm.
It's, and again, I get it. It's tough for people to kind of see that sometimes, but I'll tell you, I want friends who are going to call me out on my BS.
Yep.
I want friends that are going to say, Todd, why are you acting like that? Or why are you performing this way? Or why, and calling me out going, oh yeah, thanks for the wake up call. I needed to hear that, versus, oh no, you're great. You're fine. And they see me self-destructing over here.
Because
So,
that's what too many people allowed you to do
oh,
on drugs and alcohol, right?
absolutely. Oh, hell yeah. So I think just having empathy and love towards my clients has really allowed me to be able to build relationships quickly with them.
I
And
love that. I think, I was going to say something about your struggles become the story you tell. They become your greatest asset. And the fact that
mhm,
you can relate to someone
yeah,
and then you use that to their advantage, right? You're using that relatability to their advantage
yeah,
to relate to them so that you can help them, right? And that's, I mean,
yeah,
yeah, what no higher form of accountability or love than that.
yeah,
I remember on the first time on a sales call or after a sales call when someone enrolled and they said, no one's ever no one's ever gone that deep with me before. And that allowed me, even though it was so hard for me to go that deep and ask them all those questions about their life and how
Yeah,
it's affecting them, they appreciated it because that showed that I cared enough to go that deep and to ask those
exactly.
questions. I
For
didn't
sure.
just cut it off at the, okay, sounds good, moving on. Right.
Yeah,
Because
for
that's
sure.
not going to help anybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love hearing that. And maybe we've already spoken to this, but someone who's struggling right now, whether it be with addiction or even, some things that are seemingly less important, but in our brains are as important, building their business or becoming more fit, whatever. They say that your struggles become your story, they become your greatest
Mhm.
asset. What would you
Yeah.
say to that person right now who is struggling or who is just in the thick of just the hardest part?
Yeah, that's a tough one because when you're in that moment, it's really hard to like maybe even sometimes think clearly. But I'll
True.
tell you, it's when, and this is a tough thing to do. It's a very vulnerable thing to do, but you have to reach out and talk to someone. Call up, even if it's a friend you haven't talked to in 5 years, but you know they would listen to you. Call them up and just start talking. I think a lot of times we avoid very difficult conversations because, like, if I'm struggling, like, oh, I don't want to call Gavin because I don't want to bug him. He's busy. He's got a lot going on in his life, blah, blah, blah. What we come up with all these excuses to avoid the phone call. When in reality, you're like, you would be like, man, I wish I would have known, man, because I'm here. I'm here to help you. And so I think we have to let people know we're struggling. A lot of times when we're really depressed, we isolate.
Mhm.
And when we isolate, we don't that means we're not reaching out to anybody. And so that's what keeps us stuck. There's, in my world, we will say this a lot that you know connection's the opposite of addiction. And so we want to be connected, we want that really bad. And so for anyone who's hearing my voice right now, if you're really having a rough time, reach out to someone. Reach out to Gavin, reach out to myself, reach out to a family member, a friend, and just be vulnerable and say, I'm struggling and I just need you to hear me for a minute. And then, and pour your heart out to them. You'll be surprised how many people will just sit and listen, and then they'll let you cry on their shoulder. Because sometimes that's all we need is, I just want to be heard.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times we get, okay, well, let's send them this book. Let's do this. Not that any of that stuff can't work, but I think initially they need to know they're being heard. And
Mhm.
so please reach out to someone and tell them you're struggling. Again, I know it's vulnerable, but I'm telling you, it's the only way we're going to know that you really are in a bad spot.
Yeah, I noticed this even with my clients, and what a great message. Thank you for sharing that. But
Yeah.
even with my clients, when you kind of start to notice things going off the rails, but they're not saying anything, right?
Yeah.
And then you finally do get to talk to them, and it's like they just kind of, you just want to go inwards. It's the first thing you want
Yeah.
to do, and you just want no one else to see it because there's shame, there's guilt with
Yep.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
um it's like, but the only way, and the only way forward is through. You got to lean into the hard stuff, and you just got to have that conversation.
You
Right.
just do. You just have to. Yep.
I love that. I think that's a great place, just with the way this conversation has gone, to end it.
Sure.
Todd, you have done so much great work with so many people.
Thank you.
And I know so many people who could use your help at some point or another, could be, maybe could just use your voice in their life. I know you're a
Yeah.
podcast host. Where are the best places where people can connect with you and learn more?
Yeah. Great question. Thank you. And, I just updated my website. It's toddinspires.com. I shortened the name a little bit, and the website's, it really is kick ass. Um, there you can, you can link to my podcast from there. You can see everything that I'm about. You can reach out to me on there as well. If you have an inquiry, a question, or if you just want to talk to someone, reach out to me from there. That's the best place to do it. And I'd be happy to help you any way that I can. And I'm just grateful for this opportunity to be on your show today. It was awesome.
I think just spreading this great message. Thank you so much, Todd. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.